Welcome to the info session for the Deep Investment Fund, our newest experimental fund. It's going to be very exciting. So I'll just jump in straight away. This is our agenda for the day. We're just going to start talking about the theory behind the Deep Investment Fund and introducing what its objectives are, then go through the application process and the selection criteria and everything. All right, so the Deep Investment Fund is new this year. At the end of every year, the SHIFT Steering Committee engages in a reflection process and a retreat, a day-long retreat, in order to decide on the orientation for the coming year. So this past June, our steering committee decided on a deep investment orientation, which is focused on cultivating stronger relationships with our existing partners and community that allows SHIFT to increase the concrete contributions that we're making to the socially transformative work that our partners are doing. So this fund is sort of birthed out of that new strategic orientation. This way we can reduce the overall amount of funding calls that we put out in year 4, and that way invest our staff's time and capacity more into the potential that already exists within the SHIFT community. This fund is for project teams who are keenly interested and enthusiastic about deepening their collaboration with SHIFT and with Concordia as a whole. And this is why the funding amount is so much higher than other funds that we've run in the past. We're making larger investments in order to help our partners grow and strengthen their capacity. We want to support our partners in achieving, in increasing the capacity for socially transformative work, specifically in these 3 objectives. The first one is fairly straightforward, expanding on the project that you've already done with SHIFT. This can be pretty much any kind of expansion that you're hoping for, including reaching more people in your community through increased staffing, begin operating in another borough if that's relevant to you, creating more resources if you're a knowledge mobilization project, or translating your resources into other languages. The second objective is embedding your work in institutions and systems. So this objective is about creating avenues to work more closely and consistently with institutions in order to transform them. This could be, for example, working with a Concordia service to change their delivery in line with the socially transformative work of your project. So for example, if you want to work with the Concordia Library on free library cards for youth or something, really working closely with them and getting into their work. Another example could be creating a permanent internship site at your organization or within your networks. The last objective is sharing your expertise. This is about centering and promoting community-based knowledge. Some projects are anchored in knowledge sharing already, but others are oriented around service delivery. No matter what type of project you have, whether it's around knowledge, whether it's about service delivery, all of SHIFT's partners have expertise gained through their work and lived experience. So in this area, SHIFT wants to support project teams in creating strategies and connections to take their expertise outwards into other communities and institutions. So examples of how this could work is us supporting you in creating a accredited course at Concordia, which we've done before, collaborating with faculty on community-based research projects, advocacy, workshops, other knowledge sharing activities. So the eligibility for the Deep Investment Fund is pretty straightforward. The first one is that you've completed or nearly completed the previously funded project that got you into the SHIFT learning community. And by nearly completed, we mean that you will have completed it by the time the funding is received. So the application deadline for this fall is in November, but we won't deliver funds, like the check won't be cut probably until February, which we'll get into later. So if you're anticipating that your project will be done by February, you're eligible to apply in the fall. The next 3 are the same eligibility that we have for most of our funds. So first, you are meaningfully connected to Concordia through either academics or operations. Your project has a clear timeline of beginning and end, and you're meaningfully connected to the community affected by your work and likely to have the most impact. And I also want to add, when we say you've completed or nearly completed your project, similar to the ongoing connections grant, you have to have submitted your deliverables to your SHIFT point person in order to be counted as completed. So keep in mind. The application process. So this is the overall timeline for the fall 2022 round. The Deep Investment Fund will have a second deadline in the spring, in April of 2023. But we'll just focus on this one for now. It will run pretty much the same way. So we're already at the info session. Congratulations, you've started the application process. Well done. The second piece is the pre-proposal meeting, which is mandatory. And I want to take a little time to explain this because it's new for us. So the goal of the Deep Investment Fund, as I mentioned, is to strengthen collaboration between project teams and the SHIFT staff moving towards social transformation. So we're bringing this goal of deeper collaboration into the application process as well by having co-development of your application as a central aspect of what we're doing. So before submitting your application, you must meet with SHIFT staff. It's an approximately 30 to 45-minute meeting. The Calendly is already on the website to book. And at this meeting, you'll discuss your project ideas and start brainstorming with SHIFT staff how you can meet all the criteria and if the fund is right for your ideas. At these meetings, you can come with sort of a sketch of what you're hoping to do, but we're also going to be there with our own ideas for your project. So let's say we're going back to the example of working with the library. We might bring a different idea. So you want free library cards for youth? Well, how about we also collaborate on running reading circles at the library? And we start working together to come up with ways to strengthen your application. So after or even before, sort of depending on what you want to do, the pre-proposal meetings, project teams are encouraged to keep talking to or meeting with SHIFT staff throughout the course of their application development. So this is step 3 between October 18th and November 18th. We have a whole month. You can come back to the SHIFT staff in this time period to refine your ideas. You can start getting introductions to possible collaborators within Concordia, brainstorm more ways to strengthen your project. So the application development period is really long, and you can start meeting with SHIFT staff before your pre-proposal meeting because it is a couple of weeks away if you want to get the ball rolling on already building links, but you still have a month after those meetings to do that. So then we move to the application itself, which is due on November 20th. This time we're also mixing up a little bit our application format in that there is no specific format for our application. We're welcoming them in a variety of different styles, video, audio. You can write like a form, you can submit a slide deck, just because we want to allow project teams to express themselves and their work in a way that makes sense to them. There are some guidelines, which I'll get to next, about what questions we want answered and sort of the length of each of these different formats. And then like with every SHIFT fund, after this application is submitted, teams will be invited to meet with the jury, which is going to happen in January. And then responses will be sent by the end of January. So on this slide, it's just some screenshots of the website, but when you go to submit an application, there's a second drop-down menu called Some Guidelines. And in here, you'll find both the sort of rough time that we're hoping for audio and visual applications to be, the length of a slide deck, that sort of thing. And there's also a series of questions with approximate word counts. Those are mostly guidance to tell you sort of how important or how much effort to put into each question individually. And we're hoping that applications hit all of these. So that's on the website. I'd also like to note that there are 2 different deadlines throughout the year. As I mentioned, the second one is in April, but if you meet with your SHIFT staff pre-proposal meeting this fall, so if you do a proposal meeting next month, you can wait and apply in April if you want a way longer application development period. So if you do your meeting now, you don't have to apply in November, you can stretch it out and take more time to build. So there's 2 types of selection criteria for the Deep Investment Fund. There's the general selection criteria and then the deep investment selection criteria. So general is the same with pretty much all of our funds. We're looking for clarity in your application about what your work is, what you're hoping to achieve. We want to see demonstration of the potential for social transformation, real world impact, connection to the community affected by your work, and hopefully leadership from that community in your work. Is your project realistic and feasible in the way it's designed? Is it multi-stakeholder and multidisciplinary? And is there a connection with Concordia University? So those are the general ones. And then we have some specific criteria for the Deep Investment Fund. And these are things the jury will be looking for as you go through those questions. So the first is growth and learnings. Projects have to demonstrate clearly that there were learnings from their previously funded SHIFT project that are informing the changes they're making in the Deep Investment Fund. Sort of the why behind the changes that you're making is kind of a way to approach that. The second one is specificity, which is similar to clarity, but specifically referring to those three objectives I highlighted at the beginning. So how are you planning on sharing? How are you planning on expanding? And/or how are you planning on embedding? What does that look like? The third is SHIFT co-development. So again, this project or this fund is only for project teams that are excited about collaborating more deeply with SHIFT and with Concordia. So the jury will want to see that thought has put into how that collaboration will look and what you're excited about in that collaboration. And then the final deep investment criteria is that your project clearly outlines at least 2 deep investment pillars that you'll be working in. These are those pillars. The first one is Concordia Connection. It's in a separate color in the slide deck and doesn't count as one of the 2 because it's mandatory anyway. That's pretty straightforward. The second one is research and learning. So we're hoping to see our projects collaborate with academic sites at Concordia. So that can be, as I mentioned, something like community-based research. Training and support. This is more about your project team. So how would you like SHIFT support in strengthening your capacity beyond just funding? So that can be helping remove roadblocks, that can be helping you access training, that can be anything about your internal capacity. It can also be how can SHIFT support you in sharing your knowledge with the learning community. So how can we touch on that sharing expertise? That can be with Concordia services, with interns from Concordia, or with the wider community. And finally, space. So we have this beautiful new collaboration space, which I'm in now, one of the many beautiful rooms of. And this collaboration space on Concordia campus is open to our learning community to use for free for any different needs that you have. It can be a co-working space, it can be for workshops, events, kind of whatever. So we'd like to see our project teams tell us how they'd like to use this space. So those are the deep investment pillars. We're hoping that I strongly encourage you to build with staff at and after your pre-proposal meetings an outline for how you will work through these deep investment pillars. We don't expect you to have all the answers when you come for your pre-proposal meetings. I want to emphasize again, the idea behind them is to develop these. So if you have some ideas, that's wonderful. But if you come and you say, I want to expand, I'm not sure how, maybe training and support, we're here to help you kind of figure out what that looks like and help you create your application. Finally, finances, the good part. So there's up to $50,000 available per year for all project teams. You do not have to apply for $50,000. We want you to apply only for what you need. So yeah, teams can use 30% of the funds on core costs that are not related to your project in order to recognize the capacity it takes to do social transformation work. So core costs can be something like, we want to put a 30% towards our fundraiser's salary so they can write more grants to extend the project past SHIFT, for example. It can be on your space if you have a space, tech, whatever. We don't need specificity for how you're going to use the core costs. We just kind of want to know that you've allocated that 30% somewhere. In our budget template, there is categories under the core cost section, but this is just sort of a guideline and you're free to deviate from that if you just want to put in core costs 30%. So you can apply for 1 or 2 years of funding depending on your project needs. I encourage you not to apply for 2 years just because you're looking for that money unless you have a clear 2-year plan in mind. We understand that things will inevitably change from your initial budget in the application throughout the length of your project, but clarity as much as possible is important, especially in year 2, because that's something that the jury will be looking for. speaking of the jury, so the jury has a much more active role in funding allocations through the Deep Investment Fund than they have in other funds from SHIFT. Again, this is just because of the size, and this is our first multi-year funding offer. So the decision will be made on the holistic review of your application on whether to give 1 or 2 year funding. So the jury isn't making decisions about how much you get per year, but rather whether it will be 1 year or 2 years if you apply for 2 year funding. They're going to pay particular attention to project plan clarity, especially in the second year. So have you clearly laid out what those 2 years look like? They're going to look at the Concordia connection and SHIFT co-development plan. So again, looking for that enthusiasm, for that excitement. And then they're also going to look at the application section around learnings from your previously funded project. So they want to make sure they see sort of this plan for growth and this reflection on what you've done so far.